Welcome everyone. I decided, what I was just playing, the instrumental for poetry, actually is what I wanted to be the instrumental for my weekly radio show, the Bro.Diallo show. But then I heard that D Nice beat and had to bump this one, so I figured I use this one, which I wanted to use for my original show, as my intro and outro for the Bro Q&A with Bro.Diallo, or Monday Q&A with Bro.Diallo. This is a weekly Q&A I do with my audience, people who read my blog and who listen to my radio show. And so I got a couple of cameras going here, plus I got a feed here, so I might be looking at different cameras depending on who I'm talking to. So don't get confused, because there's enough confusion on my side of the street. I don't need y'all to be confused as well. So let's get started. The first question I got from Ebony is why are the people Bill Cosby shitted on crying and caping for him so hard? And by the people that Bill Cosby shitted on, we're talking about the black masses, and more specifically poor and working class black people. Black people who do not have money, who do not have status, black people who do not speak standard English, black people who have yet to achieve the American dream of amassing large amounts of fiat currency. And the reason why black people are fighting for Cosby, when Cosby, and it's a difference, Cosby not only didn't fight for black people, Cosby worked to subvert black people. Cosby, for many years, worked to subvert the legitimate gripes that black people had against the systems and institutions of white domination. Many of us are saying that we were denied opportunity. We are more intensely scrutinized by the criminal justice system. We are in everything from home loans, admissions into college, deliberate dumping of drugs in our community, the subversion of black autonomy through programs like COINTELPRO, subversion of black leaders and movements, all of the things that black people say, hey, this is why black people are in the state economically that we're in, and our psychological and social economic conditions. These are the explanations. This is the diagnosis and analysis. Cosby said, wash all that away. It's no more than black people have a moral failing. There is something internally wrong with us. Claude Anderson said there can only be three explanations for the state of black people. Black people are inherently, genetically inferior. That's one explanation. Another explanation could be that we're cursed by some divine force. And the final explanation is either there are deliberate, powerful interests that work directly to subvert our interests. He said those could be the only three explanations. And Cosby said it was explanation number one. The black Hebrews say it's number two. But all of our researchers, scientists, and true scholars know and understand and have the records and evidence and proof that it's number three. So, but that explains that Cosby is just not somebody who went his own way or did what he wanted to do. Cosby was a man who deliberately worked to undermine the interest of the black community and to legitimize our oppressors and our enemies. And why, after all of that, would black people still be crying injustice on his behalf? Why would we give a damn what happened to Cosby? Because Cosby, for sure, demonstrated if you weren't a black person with a seven-figure income, he didn't give a damn for you. And the reason is a few. One reason is a lot of black people are under the delusion that they too will reach Cosby's status. And when they reach Cosby's status, they imagine when they get to that status, they will be afforded a position above and beyond black people, that they can, through making money and gaining status in the society, they can transcend their skin. Transcend their skin. Therefore, they can buy their way out of oppression as individuals instead of having to work collectively to end the systems of oppression. So when they see a black person who has made it to the level that they aspire to fall, that kind of disrupts their whole worldview, their understanding of economics, their understanding of power, their understanding of their own identity. So if a Cosby can be taken out, that means everyone is vulnerable. And the thing that they're working to get to their whole life, what they're struggling for in their life, the very purpose for which they live their life has been blown up. It's like when you have evidence and say a Christian say, I believe in God, and you say there's no evidence of God. And they're like, what's the point of it all? Many of these black people are like, if I get $1,000,000 and I'm still a nigga, what's the point of life? What's the point of working so hard? What's the point of studying so hard? What's the point of sacrificing? So you'll find that any black person with money, any black person with status in the dominant system, there will be black people who represent for him no matter what he does to us as a people. Another reason is black people have been indoctrinated in the same ideology that indoctrinated Bill Cosby. So they genuinely agree with Bill Cosby. They genuinely believe that he's innocent. They genuinely believe that there's a conspiracy against him. And they genuinely believe that it is in the interest of black solidarity that we represent for any black person who has made it that gets subverted. And those people are just plain stupid. Now you have to determine if they're arrogant in their stupidity or if they're simply ill-informed, thus open to educate. And so, that's why people are buck dancing for Bill. Yeah, and say similar how we defended Cosby, R. Kelly. Now, there are many every day. Me personally, I've worked on. I got a close childhood friend who's in prison doing life without the possibility of parole for a crime that there's video footage. There is hard evidence that he didn't commit. But he grew up poor. His mother abused drugs. His father abandoned him. He didn't entertain folks. He didn't have $1,000,000. Nobody's fighting for him. Well, there are many people fighting for him. Go to freerickykid.com. But there are black men being persecuted every day that don't get this attention. People aren't fighting for Bill Cosby. They're fighting for his status. They're fighting for Bill Cosby's status. Any black person with money and fame could be inserted in that and get the same love as Bill Cosby. And so they're fighting for status and fame. They don't care about Cosby. Any rich nigga will do. Any rich Negro will who is bestowed that. But again, that comes from allowing our oppressors to pick our leaders. Yeah, some people admit it. Well, the new century of self. There was a whole program that not just blacks but all people of in the Western Hemisphere called the Century of Self. There's a really good documentary I recommend that you go watch called The Century of Self. And after the elites had faced many challenges to their power from the non-alignment movement in Latin America, from the Black Power, Black liberation struggle in the United States, and the decolonization movement in Asia and the United States, the elites, who are a small minority, remember the 1%, were like, we're very vulnerable. The people are fighting us, and we only have so much money to pay the cops and the military to defend us. So they decided we had to have a paradigm in people's thinking. So they embarked on this whole thing led by the researcher of B.F. Skinner and behavioralism, Edward Bernays. And you go look up The Century of Self. It's a really comprehensive documentary that talks about how we went from even rich black people used to pretend like they're down to poor black people pretending like they're not down. A total shift in our fundamental values. So, any other questions? Because, real talk, I'm sick of Cosby, man. Woo, I'm so sick. But I don't think we could turn away from it. I think we have to really keep our eyes open and observe and absorb this Cosby phenomenon, because it's a teachable moment, as Barack Hussein Obama would say. It's a very teachable moment. Could I recommend a book or two to help in the deprogramming of our 18-year-old and 16-year-old, deprogramming young people? In terms of a book, I'm not really sure. It depends on if they're readers or not. But let me just give some book titles that are good for a male, especially. I'm sorry. I wish I have to ask my wife about the females, but Um, One guy who wrote books specifically for that age group and the transformation or the cultivation of their thinking was Dr. Naeem Akbar, Blackheart, Blackhearted, Mrs. Blackhearted, Visions for Black Men and the Community of Self. And I like those books because they're very clear and concise. They're not long books, they're not detailed, but Visions for Black Men and the Community of Self. And for a 16-year-old girl, the Community of Self is also very, very good. And the 16-year-old girl, as she's going to be interacting with young men and as she gets older, I recommend both of those books for various reasons for young men and women. But those would probably be the top two books by the same author, Dr. Naeem Akbar, The Community of Self and Visions for Black Men. The classic Malcolm X, my son over this summer, he just turned 16 and he finished over the summer the autobiography of Malcolm X, which is almost a rite of passage at this point. And then there's also the Writers and Readers series for beginners, the Black Holocaust for beginners, Black History for beginners, Black Power for beginners. Those are graphic books or graphic novels that are very engaging for young people. And they have a wide series of titles just to start the dialogue. So that's one way of deprogramming a young person. But the best way for the overall deprogramming of young people is submerge them in the community, in the conscious community. Have them go to meetings, even in all the messiness. Let them watch the arguments, the debates. Let them see the humanity of the people struggling to empower us. They are human beings. They are very flawed, but they're struggling to see people. Take them to the festivals. Take them to your Kwanzaa meeting. Take them to book signings and lectures. And if there's no organization in your community, start it and submerge them so they know it's not just an intellectual endeavor, but it's an entire community and culture. But I hope those books help you. You talked about exploiting vulnerabilities of an eroding empire to help bring down the system. Yes, there are what I call choke points in the system, meaning that the very people that are nothing can be done on an individual basis. An individual is a unit of a whole. So the only thing as an individual you can do if you have to operate as an individual is begin to recruit and cultivate other people to work with. The only thing an individual can do is advocate for revolution, educate and promote revolution until you're able to bring more people in and begin. You need at least one other person. And each one of those persons should recruit, and you should be always working to expand. And people are going to fall off, people are going to sell out, people are going to disappoint you, and that's why it's called the struggle. Not a struggle, but the struggle. But as an individual, you have to educate other people about revolution and advocate other people join the revolution and create an apparatus to integrate people into the struggle. But before that, so that's what you have to do as an individual. And yes, I talked about we have to identify choke points or as what I call it, exploiting the choke points within the system, meaning that this very system that oppresses us depends on us. And it depends on the level of our cooperation with the system. And we can identify where the system is most vulnerable, where it most depends on us, and withdraw our support or subvert it through that way. But Chairman Fred Hampton called that raising the contradictions, which means demonstrating to the people who love the system, who submit to the system, where the system is actually not what it appears to be, raising the contradictions to the people and providing them with viable alternatives. How can we effectively combat rugged individualism within the black community when the capitalist law? Well, when it comes to rugged individualist, a lot of times it's like Cosby. Just get the hell out of their way. Get out of their way. Because rugged individualism leads to ragged individuals. And most people, and here's the thing about individualists, they're not true individualists. You can point that out, Tim Davis. When somebody claims they're an individualist, I'm all about me, that's not really that they want to do it on their own. They're more so parasitic people, meaning that they extract without giving back. A true individualist will give you nothing but also require nothing of you. But you'll find the people who claim to be individualist in your life, in your social circle, in your family, in your bed, you'll find that they're very keen on extracting from the community, extracting from individuals, but then when it's time to give back or for reciprocity, that's when they want to talk about do for self. Like Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby rose up on the shoulders of black people. Bill Cosby was in the front of the line to benefit from the not only the civil rights movement but the black liberation struggle. Bill Cosby was, and he admitted only one person he truly gave credit to, and that was Sammy Davis Jr. He worshipped Sammy Davis Jr. And if he said it wasn't for Sammy Davis Jr. facing the humiliations, the hardship, and the struggle that he went through, no other black entertainer would be where they are, especially comedic or stage performer. And so Bill Cosby was very keen on, got a lot from the community. If you listen to his comedy, his early good comedy, you'll see that he draws from the interactions and the rhythms and the for lack of a better word, the spirit of the black community. But then they turn around when they ride our backs to success, they turn around and said, I did it myself. So one thing you can do with these rugged individualists is point out that you're not individualists, you're parasitic. You're only individual when it comes to paying back the people. But you're very, very communal when it comes to extracting from us. So individualism is a mythology anyway. There's no such thing as an individual. You know, and humans are socially oriented primates. And when you isolate people from other people, we immediately start to degrade. People who are isolated from other people have shorter lifespans. They have higher rates of neurological, psychological, and physiological illnesses. Loneliness is a terminal disease. So one thing I always do when somebody tries to claim that they're individualists is to point out all the way their lives and their livelihood depends on other people whom they'll never know. I don't know my trash man, but tomorrow's trash day for me. But the trash man whom I'll never meet that I depend on, if not for him, my home, my sons would be bitten by rats and my home would be overcome with vermin. There would be higher rates of disease. I depend on the trash man to do his job. So everybody, each one is dependent on one. That's a community, that's a society, that's civilization. And individualists are savages. That's the Eurocentric concept. And like I said, there's no true individual, only parasitic. So parasitism is the true individualism. Yeah. Okay. So I hope that I don't know. I'm doing my best here. All right, Thomas. What do you say to someone who says prison labor is a choice and not slavery? I say they're a goddamn fool. Prison labor is coerced forced labor. Even though enslavers admit that they're enslaving, even the 13th Amendment, which Kanye wants to abolish, the 13th Amendment basically says that slavery is illegal in all places but prison. If you abolish the 13th Amendment, that means that slavery becomes legal in prison and all other places. It makes no sense. Because the 13th, 14th, and 15th, but Kanye's an idiot. He's just grasping at straws. You know, when he pulls his hand out of Kim Kardashian's silicone, I think, he's got silicone poisoning. He needs to use a dental dam or something. Gloves. I think he's got silicone on the brain. I can't talk about it. I live in Chicago and Kanye's here and I might bump into him in the street, so I guess I gotta watch. But no, that's not true. Prison labor is labor, and paid wage labor. If you're working a job and your main impotence for working that job is to avoidance of homelessness, avoidance of pain and starvation, you're a wage slave. Any involuntary or coerced labor is slavery. Any involuntary or coerced labor, meaning when I go to work, I'm under wage slavery. Marx told us that. Karl Marx told us that. And any labor that generates profit is slave labor. Means of production. We can go, I did a whole show on communism because black folks have an aversion to communism because white daddy told us communism is bad. But we never really studied communism. Yeah, now he said amend. He misspoke because he's just making this stuff up as he goes along. Like I said, Like I said, uh, that little too much. I mean, too much of a good thing. Too much silicone is getting in that man's system. By what means, I don't know. All right. Any other questions? I don't know how long I should harp on any particular questions, but please, y'all let me know if I'm going too long. Is it true that communism limits the personal freedoms and choices of the individual? Absolutely. Communism, capitalism, and any other ism, here's the thing about personal freedom. There's no such thing as personal freedom. People are obligated. So communism has a set of obligations. Every system, any system that you live in or economic system require things of you and it gives things of you. It's called the social contract. So me as a free American, you know, like in America, American freedom means that rich people and poor people are both forbidden to beg for bread on the street. Rich people and poor people are forbidden to go out and sleep on land they don't own. So, yes, if you lived in a communist society, there would be certain requirements or things that the society would ask of you, and in return, the society would give it to you. So, if you're going to decide, do I want to rise up and rebel against this system, or do I want to work to sustain this system, you have to say, is what this society asks of me worth what it gives back to me? But yes, if anybody who tells you any system that is implemented you will give you absolute freedom is lying to you. So there will be certain restrictions in a communist society. There will be no more profit, meaning that you cannot generate income for yourself off of someone else's labor. If someone goes to work and produces $10 worth of wealth, you can't take $8 and give them 2. They get the whole 10 back. See how that works? There's no profit. Now, let's take Trump Tower. Trump is not a carpenter. Trump is not a plumber. Trump is not an electrician. Trump is not a mason. They say Trump built these towers. How the hell did Trump build the towers? Trump didn't build towers. Trump took money he inherited and bought paper and has sheets of paper that he controls, and he gets to, as a capitalist, profit from the labor of the carpenter, the woman who sweeps the floors, the woman who makes the beds, the man who empties the trash. Everybody that makes Trump Tower function has to pay to Trump. Trump, like Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan never been to a shoe factory. He ain't never made a Michael Jordan shoe. But Michael Jackson makes more in 1 year off of Nike sneakers than all of the people who manufacture the sneakers in sweatshops in Bangladesh, China, Haiti put together. Capitalism will not, communism and socialism will not allow for that social relation. So if you want to be a capitalist, then yes, your rights will be greatly restricted. But you also have food, shelter, clothing, education is a human right. So you're going to trade things off. But no system will give you absolute freedom, and absolute freedom is a myth because everyone is obligated and tied in some way to other people. So unless you're one of those true rugged individualists on an isolated island, we're all obligated. And the thing is to say, are these obligations, are these commitments just? And what do we get in return for our inputs? What's that? What are my opinions about anarchy as a system in the positive points? Anarchy is misunderstood. Anarchy is basically, archy means rule, like democracy, demos means people. So democracy means rule of the people. Monarch or mono means one, archy. So a monarchy means the rule of one person, a king or lord. So anarchy, A means without, like anaerobic, without or lacking, means there's no hierarchy. There is no rulership. And you can have an anarcho system. But what an anarcho system requires more so than anything is a high level of individual cultivation and development. It has a high level of trust. amongst the people that no one. But what anarchy often does when it's implemented in a complex governance system is it creates a power vacuum. I'm not an anarchist and I don't support anarchy. I think anarchy only works in like Bedouin or nomadic society. I actually support hierarchies, skilled positions, and bureaucracies. It just makes sense. I'm not an idealistic person. So I am a revolutionary, Pan-Africanist, I am a socialist, but I don't identify myself as an anarchy. But I do believe that some of our social relations should be anarchical. Like my home is anarchy, meaning that I am not the ultimate ruler, my wife is not the ultimate ruler, and my children are not subjects who have no say in the matter. Everybody has an opportunity to give input. And what we try to work to in our family unit, especially now that I have a son who is 16, we often come to him and consult him on decisions. So you can have anarcho relationships where there is no ultimate ruler, but I don't think that it's functional to have a complex society with several different branches, all these interconnected interests, and function in an anarcho system. It just doesn't transfer. I think Antifa, I support Antifa. I think that the Antifa, I support their tactics, I support their ideas, and hey, when white folks want to bust the head of other white folks, I genuinely don't take a side. Generally, not genuinely. I generally don't take a side. But on this side, the anti-fascists versus the fascists, I'm rolling with the fascist white folks. So I support Antifa, but I would tell you, with your black self, don't get out here with these white kids and put on a black bandana around your face and think you can run up and punch white boys. Let the white people made this mess. That's their mess to clean up. That's their mess to clean up. But I do support them. There are factions of white, the Bobavakian and the revolutionary communists and the deep green resistance and Sarah Taylor, Derek Jensen, Eric, all of them. I think Antifa is right, and I think that in the long run, history will vindicate these white people. And so I would just caution black folks from thinking that we can engage in direct opposition, because these white Antifa kids go punch a Nazi in the face and they get a fine and their dads bail them out of jail. We go punch a Nazis and the cops are going to kill us. So when our armed resistance will not manifest as the same way as their armed violent resistance. But yeah, I support Antifa. Good white people. Good on you. A little pat on the head. Right there, virtual pat on the head for the Antifa. Y'all keep doing what you're doing. The state doesn't determine your career under communism. That is not what communism is. What most people know about communism and socialism is what they learn from capitalists. Very few people that are anti-communist and socialist that I meet actually study what the hell Marx said. Marx dealt with macroeconomics and microeconomics. Marx said the means of the production should belong to the person. Marx didn't say much about the state. Only thing Marx actually said about the state is he said in a pure communist system, the state will eventually become irrelevant because the main purpose of the state is to have a monopoly on violence, and there will be no need to bust people's heads if they're not scrapping and competing and exploiting each other. So what communism is and what socialism is people who produce the wealth actually get to keep the wealth. The people who produce the wealth do not have to hand the wealth over to a manager, a boss, or an owner. Communism is collective ownership and cooperation. That whole the government tells you what you can and can't do. That's authoritarianism. And what has happened is some so-called authoritarian states like China, like USSR under the Bolsheviks, the only true communists in the USSR were the Mensheviks, and the Mensheviks were overthrown. Remember, the Mensheviks went into exile, and Stalin had his assassins go around the world and kill the true communists. So I'm not talking about, and communists and socialists made a lot of mistakes, and we could talk about that too. But there's nothing. Go read Capital. Go read the Communist Manifesto. It ain't about the government telling you where to go to school. Right now, you got people making lists. Don't go to these schools and get these type of degrees because no capitalist will pay you to learn this. We're orienting our children's education around potential jobs from capitalists. So they don't even have to dictate to tell us what education we do. We're trying to figure out and predict what they want from us, which is a worse situation. That is not true, and that is not what communism is. The government telling you what job you can get. That is not it. You're talking about an authoritarian a system, not a communist system. And it happens more under capitalism in terms of the larger forces dictating your life, what you can and can't do, much more under truly socialist systems. But no, the choices and freedoms of people, I believe, will be expanded under a truly socialist or communist system. Talking about choices and freedom. And what capitalism does is make choice and freedom a commodity that most people can't afford, and putting a price tag on it. And then put obstructions from people elevating in the system. Anthony asks, why are these African countries celebrating independence and selling their country to the Chinese? Because the true independence movements were subverted. Not so much independence as the decolonization movements. What happened was in Africa during the great era of decolonization from the 1940s up into the 1970s, when black Africans were rising up to decolonize, they decolonized the land, but they didn't decolonize the economy. They didn't decolonize their mind. Africa didn't have the cultural revolution. Africa had a political revolution, but it didn't have a cultural revolution. They left the borders in place many times. Even your beloved Mugabe. Mugabe was a true African revolutionary. But how is he going to chase the political power out of his country, but he didn't oust the economic and religious and cultural power? Mugabe, to this day, the man who cut the head off the white man, is a Roman Catholic. How are you a Roman Catholic African revolutionary? So the reason why Africa was ripe for recolonization, and it's not just China, it's India, it's also the United States. All of the capitalist economies are recolonizing Africa. You can't be a capitalist country without colonizing Africa. But the reason why, the short answer is that it was an incomplete revolution. You need a total and complete revolution when you're under total and complete oppression or colonization. So you'll find that most of Africa is still Muslim and Christian. You'll find that most of Africa, many of their parliaments, they're still wearing the parliamentary wigs. They still are using the colonial infrastructure. They still have all the colonial borders. So the next time we mobilize, we got to redo everything. We can't just say, get the white man out. So that's why Africa will be continuously ripe for recolonization until we have a total revolution, a cultural, political, social, ideological revolution, not just, and it has to be global revolution. It has to be a pan-African revolution. You can't free country by country. You have to free the continent and the world. And Africans also should have better incorporated the African diaspora. Haiti, the blacks in the United States, blacks in the UK. Africans should have immediately. Now, there were some Africans who did that, like Kwame Nkrumah, but he was overthrown by the CIA. Idi Amin, actually. Idi Amin had brought Khalid Muhammad and several other. Zimbabwe to a limited extent. Bob Marley was by. So it should have been more of a global revolution because the colonization of Africa was a globally coordinated event. But the liberation was more regional and country by country. But the struggle continues. The African Revolution is still ongoing, just like the Haitian Revolution. So it ain't won, but it ain't fully lost either. I remember you talked about the fact you believe communism worked well for Russian and socialism worked well for African. The reason I said that communism was formulated by Marx because he was studying during the height of the Industrial Revolution. So communism works in terms of being organized for an industrial state. I don't think that Africa should industrialize. I don't think Africa should shut down all its forests, mine all of its rivers, and kill off all of its fauna. I don't think Africa should go through a modern industrial revolution. So I think that socialism, in terms of not organizing people in these work brigades and trying to do this rapid industrialization, because communism went from a feudal society to a fully industrialized society in under a generation, and it lost like 200 million people doing that. It's a very traumatic process. The industrialization of the United States saw 97% of all of its forests cut. All the grizzly bear, the puma, all the major animal, the fauna, the ecosystems are all polluted. So the reason I don't like to say communism for Africa, because for many people who study communism, who read Marx, instead of looking at communism from the point of view of like Kwame or Therese, I would say I'm more of a Therese than a Marxist. And the reason why is because I would like for African to develop according to African culture and African interests, and with a very, very strict code of preserving Africa's biodiversity and ecosystem. So it's kind of a semantical argument, but that's the main reason. Over here we say, our Marcelina, I've heard some folks state that Chinese colonialism is not the same type of threat as European due to the policy of non-interference. Do you see? No, there's a difference in method, there's a difference in approach, but the outcome is different. You have people who rape you by jumping out of an alley and dragging you into the bushes. You have other people who rape you by making you think they're your friend, offer you a drink and drug you and rape you while you pass out. There's all kind of means and methods of rape or sexual exploitation. But the ultimate end is the same. You are violated. Yes, Chinese are very different. Chinese capitalism, Chinese culture, or what they call Sinocentric. But the Chinese have this ideology of Sinocentrism, meaning that they believe that China is the center of the universe and the Chinese people's destiny is to rule over all. Just like white folks. And long before they came to colonize Africa, they spent generations enslaving their own people in sweatshops, just like Europeans did under colonialism and feudalism. So there are a lot of commonalities, there are a lot of differences, but the ultimate outcome, the exploitation and extraction of Africa's resources for the benefit of somebody outside of Africa, is the ultimate thing. So we can nitpick about the differences, but we know the outcome is the same. Their objective is the same. So we have to bang on them. And we should not relax under Chinese communism any more than we relax under European colonialism. So that's that. I hope I speak to that. But I do see differences. I do think that China is essentially an atheistic society. So they're not trying to convert Africans to any type of religion. Whereas the Arab colonizers and the European colonizers made a concerted effort to get us to worship their gods, and we're still struggling harder to free ourselves from their gods than free ourselves from their guns. Excuse me. I baked some cookies before this started. So they are atheistic. But there's another thing is that a lot of since the founding of the communist regime in the 40s, they've had this one-child policy, and in the one-child policy, many in Chinese culture they felt that a son was better. So for since the 1940s, there was a practice of if you had a child who was a girl, you would kill that child or put her up for adoption. That's why when you're in affluent white communities all over the United States, you'll see white couples with a little Chinese girl, but you'll never see one that adopted a boy. So there are literally tens of millions of Chinese single young Chinese men who have no single young Chinese girls or prospects of ever having a young Chinese wife. So they're not just colonizing the land for its material resources. They are there, and there's an exploding population of black African women who are being sold to or courted by Chinese men, and a whole generation of mixed race Chinese, Afro-Chinese blacks who are being integrated into the Chinese, which often happens, they're going to be more second class or second tier Chinese instead of Africans. So that the genetic biological colonization is an issue I think that folks need to be aware of. What do you feel the diaspora can learn from the rise and fall of the USSR? I think Africans first and foremost should understand that it has to be a complete revolution. During the USSR uprising, they even reset. I wonder why my image is so bad. Lord have mercy. But the Africans, um, when the U.S. when the Mensheviks and Bolsheviks overthrew the Russian Tsar, they wiped the slate clean. They didn't try to reform or rework or compromise with the old system. The old system had no legitimacy. They purged. And then they began an aggressive program of re-education. Now we get a lot of demonized version of it. Oh, it was a horrible time. It was a dark time. But it wasn't dark. There was a historian by the name of Fromm, and there's a book called Blood Lies about the lies that the West told about Stalin and the communist revolution in order to get us all to think if the communists are going to come kill us. They're over there killing all the Russians, and they're going to come kill us. So I think that's the thing we have to learn. We need total revolution, absolute revolution, no compromise with the systems and institutions of global white domination or capitalism. That's one thing. One mistake that we made, that the USSR made, was that they did focus too much on one thing they did is they took private industry. They basically traded state private ownership or czarist ownership with state ownership. And so I think the role of the state in terms of defending the people, in terms of organizing the people, in terms of distributing and managing the resources is good, but the state should not have absolute power. I think that and we need to decentralize the power of the state to prevent um, consolidation of power and then the capture of that power by foreign forces. So, but the nature of the USSR was different. The Russians who made the revolution, they were not under oppression, they were under exploitation. And let me just run through this real fast as I can. The difference between exploitation and oppression is exploitation is when you are oppressed by people within your own culture and race. Oppression is when you are exploited by people outside your culture and race. Which means when white people oppress other white people, that's exploitation. When white people exploit black people, oppress black people, exploit black people, that's oppression. And the reason we have to understand that is because if you're being exploited by your own people, you can overthrow your oppressors without having but you have the same language, you have the same religion, you have the same race, you have the same culture as the person you're fighting. As opposed to Africans who have a different language, culture, outlook, value system, biology, phenotype than the people we're fighting. And so when you're under that condition, there's really even less room for reform and compromise than with the Russians or even the European, the anti-monarchical. You see, white people were ruled by a monarchy, and then they had the democratic revolutions, and they wanted to implement a democratic state, and they went through these changes. But you'll see the fundamental Western culture was the same. They didn't have to have a cultural revolution. But Mao, who was oppressed by foreign capitalists, he had to have a cultural revolution as well as a political, social, economic revolution. Africans in America, even in the United States, we need to undergo a cultural revolution as well as a political, economic, social, military revolution. And if we don't do the cultural revolution, we're just going to have black exploit. We're going to have Mugabe's or black dictators rise up and pimp our struggle. We're going to have Umars at the helm. You don't want that, right? You don't want King Umar or Prince Umar to elevate to be crowned King Umar, because they had the same fundamental value system as the Protestant puritanical white men. To be honest with you, it's been probably about 8 years. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that, Chris, because I'm gonna have to pull out my West and the rest of us and review that. So let me put a pin in that one, cause it's been a good decade. Say,
Yeah.
what's going on?
I was about to ask you if I can have a cookie, but then I saw you were doing something.
You can go ahead, but you're gonna ruin your dinner. and pick up after yourself.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Chris, I'm sorry. And before I speak specifically on that, but let me get back to you on Nkrumah's continentalism between because I didn't see where they really, because it was the same like the fight between Dubois and Garvey. It's a fight that didn't really have to be a fight. The two divergent positions could merge. But let me go back to my. I have to pull out my copy of. Is it over there? Oh wait, it might be over there. Hold on. I'm just checking the bookshelf. I thought I see my West and the rest of us. Nope, it's not over here. Sorry. I'm back. Ugh. But I did get anyway, it wasn't there. Oh, it's hot. KRS-One lost his goddamn mind. You know, KRS-One came out with a Christian rap album called Sneak Attack. And if you go listen to Sneak Attack, he's literally, I thought it was a Sneak Attack. And in the Sneak Attack album cover, he's dressed like a cop. He's dressed like a cop on the cover. But he came out with a Christian album. And to this day, I bump that album. I play it. Some good stuff on there. But it's fundamentally, go to Google right now and put in Sneak Attack KRS-One. And on the cover of that album, he's dressed like a riot cop about to kick in a black person's door. But if you read on a lot on that album, it's a lot of like Cosby stuff, like lift yourself up, get money, get paid. But it's essentially a Christian album. So I think Chris is a man who's been through some severe trauma in his life, losing a child, and growing up being homeless in the streets, and losing Scott. He's been through a lot. I think that ultimately, I do think that Chris, there was a time where I do believe he had said he's an African revolutionary, first for humanity and then for the upliftment of Africa. So, and if you listen to his early stuff, it's good. But right now, I would say, yeah, KRS-One is a severe reactionary. I think it comes from, number one, not having any real balance, having anybody, not being surrounded. He's kind of like, you'll find a lot of people who are political or conscious. It's an isolating thing. If you don't have other conscious people or other people who are cultivating or developing, you can sometimes go crazy with it. You need a counterbalance. You need to be around other other people who are studying and engaged in the work. I have a lot of appreciation for Boogie Down Productions, not just KRS-One, but the whole BDP crew, BDP posse, because I know they worked to enlighten and help to build up a lot of people. But I would call KRS-One a new Negro. That Bambaataa, the way he dealt with Bambaataa, he put out that Christian album, Spiritually Minded. If you go back to his book, his album Sex and Violence, he denounced Christianity. He said you're looking in a dead book for a live God. So Chris is a creative dude. He's obviously a bright guy, but I've seen him perform, and it's really a show. I saw him perform in Madison Square Garden at the Old School Hip Hop Showdown, and I say, even now, you go look at my shelf. I got every Boogie Down Production album and many of the KRS-One albums. But he kind of lost me years ago, long before the Bambaataa thing. He lost me. And yeah, I would definitely say he's a new Negro at this point. I don't trust nothing he's putting out, or I don't have respect for anything he's saying or advocating. Yeah, I think it's a loss. It's a loss, but thank God he put out some good music in the 80s and 90s. 2000, man, you know. But and I really don't understand because even when I was coming up, back when I was super militant, and people would always say to me, "I used to be just like you, and I used to be revolutionary." I don't believe that you could be an ex-revolutionary. You know, it's like so. I think if you don't hold to it, I don't think you ever held to it. But yeah, short answer, yeah, I think he is a goddamn new Negro. Uh, Apparently, with your Bro.Diallo show and your Q&A, a lot of people are really starting to listen and pay attention to you. Okay, if you think so. With that being said, knowing how the alphabet boys are on you somewhat, alert your surroundings with. I've always look. I grew up in East Hills Village, um, and I graduated. I left East. I left Kansas City in 1992. And if you go back to the crime stats, y'all talk about Chicago this, Chicago that. Kansas City was the number one murder capital. We used to call it Killer City, Killer City. And so I've always had to been alert of my surroundings. My wife, who grew up like a Cosby kid, two-parent household, wholesome, beautiful family, who stressed education and family values. I kind of when she walks the street, she's kind of like aloof and. So I've always watched myself, but I don't worry about police surveillance and the COINTELPRO and things of that nature, because having studied uh, counterintelligence, having studied subversion, it's like Bobby Wright said. They don't care what I say. They care what y'all respond to. So I could rant and rave all I want. It even makes the system look like it's an open and fair and democratic system. Remember, Martin Luther King ran around this country, pissing off the most dangerous, deadly white people back in the 50s, back when they were still lynching black folks. Remember, Malcolm X ran around talking about the white man is a Caucasus Mountain cave dwelling devil. And they didn't kill him. They don't kill you because they don't like you. They don't kill you because they don't disagree with you. They survey you, they monitor you, and they neutralize you when you become a material threat. And my position has always been, I don't ever want it to be about me. I don't ever want me to be like, well, Diallo's the movement. It's not a cult of personality. So by the time that I'm a material threat, the revolution, the way that I'm organizing, the revolution will have to be self-sustaining, meaning that you bury the man and continue the plan. I do take precautions. I do defend myself. I do got my little pistol. you know, I do all that background stuff. But as far as some Illuminati, Freemason, secret agent jumping out the bushes, I would like to get to that stage, but we're not there yet. Let's not fool ourselves. I have enough trouble trying to organize a little book club. The movement has not advanced, at least my position within the movement. You know, I'd like to get to that stage. I'm not afraid of that stage, but yeah. But to answer your question, yes, I am very security conscious for me, my family, and my allies. And I take the necessary precaution depending on the level of risk. And I'm very security and conscious. You know, so, yeah, I take care of myself and I look out. I'm not naive or foolish, and nor do I have a martyr complex. I'm trying to live for the city. And I eat healthy. I take care of myself. So, don't have to worry about none of that either. Lumumba, I'm not familiar with what you're asking me, Marlena. No, I don't think celebrity worship will ever usurp Christ. No, I think that religion and celebrity worship are feed into each other. I don't think that there will be like a true usurpation of the influence of religion. I don't think there would be any rock star that's big like when the Beatles, when Paul McCartney said we're bigger than Jesus. No, I think it was John Lennon said we're bigger than Jesus, and that people were outraged. I think, you know, Jesus's pip hand is way too strong. He ain't about to be usurped, not anytime soon. I don't think the church has any fear of that. And you know, the preachers still pull in the religion pulls in more money than and it has more influence over the state than entertainers do. And entertainers come and go. Michael Jackson, Lou Rawls, you know, Teddy Pendergrass, Kanye West will be irrelevant in the next few years. So these entertainments go and go. Jesus has been at the top at his game for the last 2,000 years. So I don't see that happening. Recent polling in black immigrants from the islands of Africa, higher percentage would be black country, somewhat black. Well, here's the thing. Majority black countries and somewhat wrapped in a cocoon of blackness. How many positively impact black immigrants than someone born in... What? That's a long question. I'll just read it again because I was trying to just sum it up in my head while I read it. I've seen a recent publication that black immigrants from the islands or from Africa have higher percentages of being successful in America than African Americans. Do you think it could possibly have anything to do with coming from a majority black countries and somewhat being wrapped in a cocoon of blackness, and how that may positively impact black immigrant than someone... No. Here's the thing about immigrants. What you have to understand. If you go to Jamaica, the average black American in Jamaica is doing better than the average Jamaican. If you go to Ghana, the average black immigrant from the United States to Ghana is doing better than the average. The immigrants always do better than the native born person. If you go to China, the black people who've moved to China are doing better than the average Chinese citizen in China. You can't really see an immigrant. Generally, when people immigrate to a place, unless it's just like especially across oceans, they tend to have higher education and be more affluent and go. Like in the United States, there's this stereotype that Asian people are so hardworking and so into study. But if you go to China, you see a bunch of Chinese crackheads, Chinese drunkards, Chinese illiterates, and dropouts. So it's not the Chinese value education, it's that the kind of people who get ahead tend to migrate. I have a cousin who is a millionaire. She lived in France. I don't know if she has dual citizenship. No, she always complaining because she has to pay French taxes and U.S. tax. She lives in France. She speaks French fluently. And she is more educated and wealthier than the average French citizen. And there are French people everywhere you go. You find the native population like, oh, these immigrants come and take this. That's a hustle. Now, so that's just the nature of immigration. The people who move across borders tend to be the strivers. And the people who stay behind the borders tend to be the less than strivers. So just like you will find the Jamaicans in America are doing better by and large, Nigerians in America are doing better by and large than blacks born in America. Then the Americans in Nigeria are doing better by and large than Nigerians born in Nigeria. Look it up. The stats are there. There are a lot of African Americans, as you call them. That's not my term for us, but if that's what there are a lot of African Americans who live abroad. And statistically, the African Americans who live abroad tend to be more affluent, more educated, and have more quote-unquote opportunities than the people who are born there. That's the nature of immigration, and every immigration group goes through that. Every immigrant population deals with that. And so but that's different, because you could talk about refugees. Refugees tend to they come with nothing. And so there's that dichotomy. And also, what we have to say is a lot of the Africans that migrate here are from the sellout community. They're from the sellout class. Like there was another guy from, a friend of mine A friend of mine in Kansas City, his name was Jallo. He spelled his name just like I spell mine, Diallo, but it was his last name. I pronounced my name Diallo. He pronounced his name Jallo, like with the J. Now this dude had migrated to America to pursue his college education. And now one day I'm having a casual conversation with him, and he lived pretty much the same life as me. He had a little car, had a little job, had a little something, but he wasn't by any means rich. But he told me when he was growing up, they had two house servants, they had a live-in chauffeur, they had a huge estate and a lakefront summer home. He was from the African elite, the African aristocracy, and they come here and live middle class sometimes. But the revolutionaries, the freedom fighters, they don't get to go there. So you meet one Africa from Senegal, or you meet one African from Kenya. I had an African from Kenya tell me, "Oh, you're not African. We don't like Africans." He was a Kikuyu, another friend of mine. Black Americans aren't Africans, and Africans ain't Black Americans. And I can take that and be like, well, this guy and his mother, it was just him and his mother. His father, who was a Luo, he was Kikuyu. His mother was Kikuyu. Well, he thought he was torn. But anyway, long story short, they came here and made a good life. But they had a boost coming here. But so it doesn't make sense. You can't really pit native born populations against immigrant populations because the immigrant populations always outshine. But that's even if you get the black people who travel abroad too. You know, Del Jones, before he died, he was building property. He was building an estate in Ghana. And if he had moved to Ghana, he'd be more and have more and be more educated and be more affluent than the average black person in Ghana. That's the nature of immigration. It ain't really about black people coming here eating our lunch. You know, you find the average Swiss migrant, and on top of that, the two outside of illegal immigration from Latin America, the largest rates of immigration is coming from China and India. So if you want to bump heads and talk about an unworthy population coming here to eat your lunch, you should be fighting against the Chinese and the Asians. If you're going to fight an immigrant population, because for every African that makes it here, there are literally thousands of Asians coming to eat your lunch. But y'all, you know, so if you want to do that dichotomy, but I think that's a stupid fight to have. Because there's really nobody, even when you win, you're still at a loss. What time is it? Oh, 8:07. We got a little time. Do I agree with Ella Baker's assessment that Black America's reliance on charismatic leaders is a hindrance on mass organization? Absolutely. Africans were better known. Africans at one time were a population that was least likely to follow individual leaders, and we more so followed a code of ethics, ideas, concepts, visions, and agenda. That's what we followed. But ever since the plantation era, the white slave master would always give us the plantation preacher. And so we just continued that after our emancipation. We continued that whole plantation. The slickest talker would be the leader. I think black people need to stop following individuals and start following ideas. I think that the African leaders, the official position of African leaders should be a status or a position, but not a person. And we can interchange those people. As Dr. John Henry Clark said, bury the man, completely continue the plan. You should develop an ideology and an agenda and stick to that and let the leadership cycle in and cycle out. And the leaders should not be measured by how well they talk or how well they're liked, but how well they speak to the agenda and they advance us toward the agenda. And being a black leader should be the hardest job. It should be a job that is under constant criticism, constant scrutiny, and constant turnover. That's my position. And even the most progressive black organizations got this leader for life. And if you are a leader, been in your organization for more than 25 years and ain't switched over, you're no longer part of an organization. You're a member of a cult of personality. You're a member of a dictatorship. And you can't claim you want freedom from white oppression, but you ain't even willing to get freedom from black dictatorships. Yes. Even organizations, Nation of Islam, Uhuru Movement, National Black United Front. Y'all done had leaders. I'm just saying. Don't ask and I won't tell. These Leadership for Life organization. That's one thing about the NAACP. They know how to turn over leadership for all the bad things. So I ain't even working. I ain't building with no more of these Leader for Life organizations. And it does. It creates a stagnation. How am I been leading a group in the 1980s and here it is 2018? I ain't up on technology, but I'm still the final say in all things. Yes, we need to learn how to turn over the reins. Diallo, as Africans in America, what are the most important steps that must be taken towards participating in sustaining cultural revolution in your opinion? First, this is something I had to learn the hard way. You can't make revolution without revolutionaries. The first thing we need to do is educate and cultivate a revolutionary cadre. Because we got a lot of reactionaries, we got a lot of nationalists, we got a lot of militants. But we have very few revolutionaries. So the first thing towards a cultural revolution is that we got to draw the line in the sand. We have to define what African revolution is. We have to define who the African revolutionaries are. And then we create a cultural revolution by the we who are woke. Because every time I gather with other conscious black people, we talk more about the unconscious, what the unconscious people aren't doing, than what the conscious people are doing. So when we start to make our ideas manifest materially in our community, that's when the revolution starts. When a black youth can get up and say, if a black youth wakes up in the morning and say, I want to be a basketball player, he knows the steps to take. He knows I got to train basketball. I got to start play basketball in high school, get into a summer league, go to a training camp, build up my strength and stamina, ball handling abilities, this and that. If a young man wakes up tomorrow and is like, yo, I want to be a gangbanger. He knows the specific gangs. He knows the specific activities and skill sets. He knows the benefits and risk. If a young black man wakes up tomorrow and says, I want to be a revolutionary, where do I go? What do I do? What specific skills are necessary to be an asset for that? Who do I talk to? What benefits will I derive from being a black revolutionary? What risk will I open myself up to? So we as African have to create the infrastructure and apparatus for revolution. We have to pull our resources and construct the material, physical apparatus for revolution. Institution buildings, following of protocols, distribution of resources and support network. We got to start making revolution. And then as we start to have the material foundation for revolution, then the opposition will emerge. The church, the black church, the descendants of slaves, the poverty pimps, the old school integrationist arm of from Messy Jesse and the Push, Rainbow Push, all of that, our opposition will emerge. And then the revolution is when we beat down that integrationist, reactionary, irrational, militant opposition. But you can't have a revolution just with ideas. Ideas are a foundation for revolution, but that's not the vehicle. You need a physical vehicle to advance those ideas. I know most people are pro Mugabe. Mugabe is another one of those charismatic leaders for life. I'm not very happy with Mugabe. Yes, I think Nigerians should be able to come here and receive affirmative action benefits. But I don't know why we're fighting over affirmative action when affirmative action has already been delegitimized by the Supreme Court. Y'all fighting over a rotten chicken wing. Give me that. That doesn't exist. Why don't y'all fight over who gets the biggest piece of Jesus pie? Affirmative action has been rendered null and void by the U.S. judicial system. So we fighting over something that doesn't exist. And yes, if affirmative action existed, yeah, the Africans from abroad, every African in the world. The United States is a global empire. Go look at the resources. Look at the subversion. Go read Economic Hitman. Nigerians have suffered as much from Western imperialism and even U.S. imperialism as we have here in AFRICOM. What the hell? Instead of extracting resources from our oppressors, we're going to fight over crumbs? So yeah, Mr. Nigeria, if you want to come here, and if you're an Uncle Tom Nigerian, we're going to fight you. If you're an Uncle Tom Black American, we're going to fight you. If you're a Nigerian revolutionary, we're going to unite and build with you. If you're an Uncle Tom Nigerian, we're going to fight you. I mean, Why is this so goddamn complex? I don't understand this. I'd rather have a revolutionary Nigerian get a scholarship than an Uncle Tom black American. To me, it's ideological. I mean, damn. I mean, we used to complain about the white man trying to divide and rule, divide and conquer. Now we complaining that the white man is putting us together. You call me a Nigerian, and now the white man's grouping us together and they're dividing apart. You want to fight with Nigerians over crumbs, or you want to fight with against Europeans for our total wealth? Yes, Africans from around the world should be able to extract whatever benefit from the systems and institutions of white domination they can get. And we should say, hey, go, do you. Uh, how do you start learning about how public policy is created, implemented? Should I start going to city hall meetings with the notepad? Yes, you should definitely go to your local, engage in your local politics. That's exactly what you do, Freeman. You answered the question that you asked me. Public policy is very important. I actually have a master's degree in public policy, full disclosure, and that's where politics is. Politics goes beyond the voting booth, and there are always and oftentimes my wife and I we go to these civic meetings. They just are about to. I have to get the date. I went to a couple of them, but they have the city always has offering. But if you just go to your .gov site, kcmo.gov, windycity.gov, your local Democratic and Republican Party meetings. Yeah, you go there with your notes, you take notes, and you take names. You introduce yourself, you shake hands. I mean, you go to room your state senator. You can go to your also CDC, local, federal, and local state governments. You got to learn the names. And what I would like to do is divide up, have segments in the community that watch the water reclamation district, that watch the treasury, that watch the police, that have surveillance communities that gather public information, everything from the website to journalism, dealing with certain segments of the governance. And we used to have political clubs. The Kansas City Southside Democrat Club, the Kansas City Civic Club. We used to have civic and political clubs in our community. The politicians would have to come out and dance the jig. I haven't seen that since I was in Kansas City and a member of the National Black United Front. Um, the politicians would have to come to the MBUF and they would come and ask for our endorsement, which they most of the time didn't get unless they emerged from our organization. And they had to lay out their platform and tell us what they're going to do. And we'd already have a dossier. We'd already have documents on every politician that say, well, while you were in city council, this is what you did, this is your voting record, and you mean to tell us you about to go do something different? So yeah, a lot of people tell us to shun politics, but telling a black person to shun politics is as stupid as telling black people to shun economics. So you're on the right track. Yes, yeah. Nigeria built the biggest Jesus statue on the continent of Africa, but I don't know. Is it bigger than that Jesus statue in Brazil? I hate Jesus. I can't stand religion. Even y'all spirituality. I don't want no parts of none of y'all hocus pocus spookism. Right, the most revolution. Yeah, I had a. He wasn't a revolutionary, but he was definitely down with the empowerment of black people. Professor Dima, I believe he's still teaching. Brilliant guy. He used to call me a Marxist. And another one, Professor Endow, he was a Muslim. He taught my grad class in Islam in Africa, the history of Islam in Africa. And he was from. I mean, I don't understand why we think, you know, that there's anything to be gained in trying to subvert Africans in the United States. Yeah, I think Mugabe's got gets more love and credit from the community than he deserves. start 8:19. All right. Do your homework, right? Revolution is an intellectual endeavor. That's something. When people, I'm sick of, I ain't with all this talking, I'm with action. Let that dude run off the cliff by his damn self. Be about that talking. Be about that reading. You know, for every hour of work we do in the community, there should be at least 5 hours of study, research, reflection, evaluation of that action. Be about that talking. Don't let nobody shame you. Don't let nobody shame you in your intellectual endeavors and pursuits. Like I said, don't engage in any action that is not preceded by research and development and that is followed by evaluation and critical review. And anybody that ain't about that talking is not about that liberation. Where we at? And I gotta go read. I gotta go pull out my Chinwezu books. I'm gonna make a note of that because I sure don't appreciate Chris stumping me. And you asked me that at our last meeting. You asked me about that, and I still. So I'm gonna make a note here in Kuma. So I have an answer for you. No, you gotta do homework because when you. Okay, Erica. Are we done with questions? I mean, these are some good questions. I wish I had answers to everything, but like I said, I will always admit when I don't know. I'm not gonna make stuff up. Y'all heard Umar has got the money to purchase the school, but don't have the money to build. Umar's a wild dude. Man. So Umar, and Umar should have put me on that account. Because I had always said Umar, when he first went down to St. Mary's College and walked the campus and said, this is what we're trying to buy, and it costs this much. And I'm like, I said it publicly that how you need an operational budget. You can't just purchase something. You need for staffing, for grounds maintenance, and I had said that, like, he wasn't raising enough money. He raised too much, but he didn't ask for enough to really do what he was trying to do. He was under assessing what it would cost. So now he said Umar has found a school, and he wants contractors to volunteer, not just your labor, but materials. So you got to bring your own. Not only do you got to put the brick and the cement together, you got to bring the brick and the cement and the lumber and the copper wire and the copper pipes. And bring your own hammer, everything. Umar has nothing for you but encouragement. You got to bring your own lunch. He ain't even going to fry no eggs. His baby mama owns a vegan restaurant. He done alienated her. She probably could have catered all that free labor. You could have got a free vegan sandwich out of it, but he done messed that up. Man. Umar, start small, man. He needs to just stop altogether. Umar is not an African. Umar is a Puritan. Umar needs to quit this African stuff and go join Focus on the Family. He needs to go join the Christian right. He needs to shave that beard off and go sit next to Clarence Thomas. And because that's when you listen to his program. He's a right-wing Puritan. He's trying to Africanize Western concepts and the fundamental puritanical ideology that came out of Europe. He's not African. Nothing he says is African. The Prince of Pan-Africanism. He's the Prince of Black Puritanism. Oh, we got another question. Yeah, ask me questions because I'm end up saying things I don't need to say. When a group sets a political agenda, how do they hold politicians accountable? In the United States, the way you hold politicians accountable is by being able to run an oppositional candidate. If you can go to a politician and say, we have a person and the apparatus and the funding to caucus you, to run someone against you, they get in line. That I find that more so than even donating money to their campaign. They fear opposition more than anything else. So that's one way to hold a politician accountable. You got a local alderman, you got even the mayor. You say, well, we got our own candidate. So you either advance this position or we'll put somebody there who can. Or you can also do a positive reinforcement and saying, we know if you advance our agenda, the white folks going to come for you, the other special interests going to come for you, but we good. We got 20,000 secured votes, and we got another 500 volunteers that'll pound the pavement, get signature, get your name out, so we can guarantee that you stay in office. You tell a politician, I can take you out of office or I can keep you in office. Let's sit down and negotiate. We go to politicians and say, do what you promised. Do it because you love us. You know, this ain't about love. My son is in the second grade and having difficult time keeping up with most of his classmates. I don't know what to do, and should I homeschool? Yes, you should homeschooling and tell him to hell with keeping up with other people. If your child's trying to become my son, I had some of the same, my older son. You know, if you have the option of homeschooling, even if your child was at the head of the class, I'd get them out of the institution if they don't know how to deal with a child. You know, children develop differently. So I would recommend, if that is a viable option for you to homeschool him, then so be it. But if it's not a viable option, I'd show up at that school and tell them, listen, my son is developing at his pace. This is not a competition, it's a cooperation, you stupid ass house nigga. And tell him, lay off my son. You know? And if we can do some supplemental work in this, but my son doesn't exist to keep up with or to match pace with anybody else but himself. You know, education is about cultivating young minds. The word educate literally means to bring out. Education does not mean compete and run alongside other kids. You know. So if your child is in an institution that can't accommodate different means and different rates of development and different ways of processing information, then they need the ones that need to get their act together, not our babies. Do you believe that the United States and global capitalism is experiencing imperial decline, and are we in any position to exploit? Yes, the United States is in imperial decline, but we shouldn't be dancing and celebrating that, because remember when the British Empire was in decline and they passed the football to the United States. Remember when the number one global empire was Portugal. Remember that? That's why the largest population of Africans outside of the Africa, Brazil, they speak what? Portuguese. Why? Because there was a time when Portugal was number one. And then it went into an imperial decline, and here come the Spanish. Then they went into an imperial decline. Here come the British. And out of nowhere, the British had to deal with the French. The French and the British were tag teaming. And then here come the United States. So just because an empire is falling doesn't mean that there's not another. India is ready to take over. China is ready to take over. And even Russia under Vladimir Putin has certain imperial tendencies. So just because American empire falls doesn't mean Africans in the United States and around the world will not still have to deal with imperialism. And we are not currently in a position to exploit the decline. What's most likely going to happen right now for black people in the United States and most other places in the world, as the empire collapses, we'll be at the bottom of the rubble. It's going to collapse on us. So we need to get in a position to exploit we need to organize to put ourselves in a position to exacerbate, to accelerate the decline, direct the decline, and complete the decline. But we're not in that position now. I wish I could say that we were, but we're not. We don't have the revolutionary infrastructure in place. Well, maybe you could tutor him when he goes to law school, Adolfo. Umar also wants us to give him $300,000 so he can go to law school and get out of law school and fight for us. The United States, in terms of economic collapse, the United States has always had economic collapse. And you know what happens during U.S. economic collapse? The people at the top get richer. They make money off the rise and the fall. So yes, the United States has had periodic collapses every I think 12 to I think the longest they went where they almost had 30 years without an economic collapse because they implemented FDR socialism. But yes, the United States is due for a collapse because Obama didn't fix anything, and so the bubble, the economic bubble, the housing bubble is back. Remember, under Clinton, we had a tech bubble. We got a tech bubble. Everything from Apple to Amazon is well overvalued. Well overvalued. Um, Chinese owns like what 17% of all U.S. debt, and so they do have a vested interest in sustaining the dollar status. But yes, it's due for an economic collapse. And what they call it, the rich people don't call it a collapse. They call it a realignment, a shuffling of the decks, because they don't miss a meal. They just charge Elon Musk, you know, $20 million. They charge him a $20 million fine, and he's like, fine, I'll pay it. So these people that at a certain level in the economy, they're immune to collapse. So yeah, we're always going to have a collapse. They're always going to have to to what they, I think Alan Greenspan called avoid irrational exuberance. You know, the economic collapse or by design most often, and the elites make more money, as much if not more money on the fall as they do as the rise. So what we need to do is dismantle this system. Stop letting it fall on us. Build it back up and let it fall down on us again. We need to dismantle it. Yes, we are, and that's why I advocate for global socialist revolution. Um, China will invade Africa under these conditions. Number one, China is on the verge of having ecological collapse. China has over 1 billion people, and there was a time where China was completely independent in terms of food feeding itself. China didn't import any food. It had a very efficient, but due to industrial development. Now, China is also struggling very fast to implement renewable energy and more innovative means of agriculture to feed its billion plus citizens. But there's still a chance that any major ecological catastrophe, volcano, nuclear fallout can cause a mass exodus from China. And Africa, to this day, has the lowest land density in the world. And land density means number of people per square mile. And so Africa has a lot of what capitalists say undeveloped space. So anybody that needs to move a mass of their population to an area, Africa's very ripe for that. Very attractive. So if China has a major ecological or catastrophic environmental catastrophe, that could cause them to invade, like seriously start to claim territory. Another thing is that China has gone to Africa and signed these really lopsided deals, such as in Ghana and in Zimbabwe, where they have paid for the harvest for the next 75 years. They were like, we will buy your harvest, your harvest. So if Africa has a famine or Africa crop yields start to drop to a certain level where the Africans have to choose between exporting their food to China and feeding themselves. And so if China does not get it what they paid for, if Africa starts to default on the debts that China put it under, then China through military means can enforce through embargo, blockades, sanction, and physical invasion. Those are the two main reasons I think that China would mobilize the largest army in the world by person. But if that happened, Africa would be the battleground, even though Africans weren't be the main ones fighting, because of the U.S., the West would definitely try to circumvent that. Because if China gets a physical foothold in Africa, more than just its current economic foothold, then they can shut off the extraction of resources, Africa's resources, to the West. It's an ugly scenario that I don't think it's a rock and a hard place that Africans should not allow themselves to be in. I think that it's a waste of time and resources to create a political party. I think it would make more sense for Africans to exert the power that they already have in the Democratic Party. And I know that's a very unpopular position, but it's practical and pragmatic. I would not put up money and have black people doing all this work to build something that we already have access to. I think black people in the city centers should engage in a bloodless coup. I think we should implement a democratic coup. But I also think that Africans should be politically independent. I think we should caucus with the Green Party, caucus with the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, or even depending on where you are and what policies you're advocating, even, Republicans. I think we need to go to where we get the most out. I don't think any party has earned our loyalty. But I don't think that it's necessary to put up the resources. Hey, Cleopatra, for building our own party. That would be more of a vanity type thing. We build it just so we can say we got one, but it would not have any real standing. I mean, we're only 13% of the population. It'd be a waste of time and resources to build our own party. But I think we should exert our power within the political arenas that we dwell in. Man, damn. Gosh, okay. Let's work something out. Grow. You already got a beard. Just buy a poofball hat and make your appeal, Adolfo. But see, you're asking me with a country versus continent. China would not invade Africa. China would invade individual countries. So one of the countries I think would be very ripe for Chinese invasion would be Zimbabwe, would be some of the North African countries. But I don't think there's any African. Well, I'm gonna tell you like John Henry Clark said. There's no African country right now that a well organized Boy Scout troop couldn't overthrow. Militarily, African militaries are not organized for national defense. They're organized for suppressing their own citizens. An African soldier points his gun at other African citizens of his own country. So I think that, but the other side of that is, to quote John Henry Clark again, he said, when properly organized, equipped, and motivated, there's no greater fighter than Africa. I think if Africa did come under a direct invasion from China, we would have to engage in asymmetrical guerrilla warfare. We need to take it to the mountains and take it to the hills. And I think that Africans could fight off an invasion. You don't really need an army, and you don't have to fight. When you're fighting a guerrilla warfare, you don't have to fight to victory. You fight to a standstill. I would do like the Iraqi insurgents or the Afghanis did in Africa. You'd have to engage in in guerrilla warfare and asymmetrical guerrilla warfare and sabotage. And Africans could easily win that. But then you have to deal with the ideology because many Africans are not revolutionary in their thinking. Most Africans are not. Let's see. I don't know. I in terms of others, if China invaded, which is not anything that I see coming soon, but the problem is, Libya. No, the other African countries didn't rally to aid Libya. It's easier to get Africans right now in the Congo. The United States under Barack Obama, Rwanda is fighting a proxy war. So it's easy. It's more likely that China will be able to pay one African country to fight another African country on its behalf than two African countries coming together to fight China. That's the reality. What can we do to prepare for the collapse? In terms of it depends on if it's a national economic collapse or a regional collapse, whether it's a minor depression or recession versus a major and full-on economic collapse. But the best thing we can do to prepare is build community, to build our communal ties, to learn to build up a level of trust, camaraderie, and the sharing of resources. The best thing we can do, any groups that survive collapse. Now, let me give you a book, because it's kind of complex, Veronica, when you ask what we can do. But I'm going to recommend a book because I'm kind of short for time. But I will, if you tune into my show, I'll do a show on collapse preparedness. One thing I don't tell you to do is get into that whole survivalist thing. I'm not saying don't buy your guns and get your ammos and your food, but that survivalist mentality. Those people never survive collapse. One thing we can do is study economic collapse. There's a documentary online called How Cuba Survived Peak Oil. And there's a book. There's a writer who went through the Russian economic collapse when Russia, the Soviet Union dissolved, called Dmitry Orlov, and he wrote a book called Collapse Best Practices. Those are two really good books, but it's kind of a complex thing. But I tell you the thing, to build up your circle, build up and reinforce your family, and not your relatives. Your family are not the people you're just blood related to. Family are people that hold common mission, common ideology as you do. So have your people you can follow that can depend on you and know they can depend on you and you can depend on them. And as the collapse comes, you come together, have dinner together, study together, work together, build up that network and that unit. That's step one. And you can read Dmitry Orlov on that. But I will start doing more shows on how to survive or what to do and how to prepare for various types of collapse. I've always said guerrilla warfare was the wave to keep issues refused. Yes, that's true. They can't deal with it. They still haven't come up. The United States created a whole new branch of its military called the Green Berets to deal with. The United States has never won a guerrilla war. They never. Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. They've never won a guerrilla war. They just can't. It's impossible. Occupying army. The only place you can really defeat a guerrilla warfare is in your own territory. That's why when Che Guevara came to the United States, he told black folks, don't do guerrilla warfare in the United States. But just guerrilla warfare is a logistical nightmare. But that whole Che, that's another thing. But Mao and Che have two really good books, and Revolutionary Warfare, Kwame Nkrumah. There's a lot of good books. And The War of the Flea. I had a copy of The War of the Flea, and one of my so-called friends borrowed it and never gave it back. That's why I stopped lending it out. I don't give nobody no kind of books. I'm a rugged individualist when it comes to my books. I don't share. I'm communist and socialist with everything else. You can even borrow my video games. You can't borrow my books somewhere. You can come here and sit on this couch in this office and read all my books, but you ain't taking my books out this house. I done lost too many books that way. To me, we have to worry about from the stranglehold the European countries and their settler colonies have on Africa than we do from China. Yeah, the West is still Europeans, white folks are still a bigger threat than the Chinese to Africa and the world. That's true. But I guess we're just so familiar and comfortable with white domination. We just, you know, yeah, yeah, you're right about that, Tim. Whitey still is Almighty Whitey, still on top. Our imperishable foe, our eternal bitter enemy, to quote Chancellor Williams. All right, we have to wrap. Can we get any more questions? And this Bro.Diallo Q&A. Do I need to play the outro music? Man, this YouTube picture is whack. Lord. Oh, that's a little better. Just a tad bit taste. Oh, why is this camera so whack? Man, I need to clean the lens. How would someone become a vegan? You become a vegan by getting off the swine. Just stop eating anything that comes from an animal. But you're probably asking, listen, you're going to have cravings. You're going to have withdrawal, just like getting off of crack. You're going to have withdrawal, shakes, belly aches, all of that. It can be. But one way, again, another way, because humans, we're social primates. One of the easiest way to become a vegan is to start interacting with and surrounding yourself with other vegans. You know, and our superior aura will engulf you and embrace. No, let me stop. If you want to become a vegan, there's no vegan club or vegan meetup in your community, start one. But the best way, because I hear people always, you go cold turkey or you just stop eating beef, then you stop eating pork, then you get the chicken and all of that. None of that really works. The people I've seen become vegans and sustain their vegan diet are people who submerge themselves in the vegan community. Just like if you want to be a gangster, you start hanging out with gangsters and kicking it with gangsters and doing gangster things, putting in that work. So, Daddy Buck, when I became a vegan, fortunately, I had homies in the neighborhood and living in the projects. We put together our money, and there used to be this thing called the Jack LaLanne juicer, and we went out and bought a juicer, and then we went to our local health food store back to the land, and we started experimenting with various recipes. And all my homies we were trying to first we stopped eating pork because we wanted to be righteous. We wanted to stop eating pork like Malcolm X. And this is when I'm like 16. And by the time I was 18, I was a full-fledged vegan. And I had my homies, like my closest homies, my partners, the dudes I used to run the street with. We went on, embarked on that together. If it was just me in my neighborhood, it probably would have never happened. You know, somebody to talk about your cravings, talk about your stumblings and your falls, somebody that can relate to what you're going through. So embed yourself in the vegan community or create a vegan community circle. That's one of the best ways to transition to vegan. And then, you know, you can start experimenting with recipes, shopping at various grocery stores. You know, I used to walk in the store, just grab some lemongrass, grab some bok choy, things I never tried before, and just start trying to cook them up. You know, it's a wonderful adventure, but you will start to feel the physical benefits almost immediately. You'll feel your body, your whole physiology will start to change. So that's also an encouragement. But then you do start hitting walls too, and when the cravings kick in. Yeah, there is a difference between communalism and communism. Communism is a formal economic system. Communalism is a practice amongst people. So you can be communal right now, but you can't be communist because communist is about the economic system, the state-sanctioned economic system. So, but basically, communism is a communal state, you know, a government or a communal economic system. But communalism can be practiced amongst people, like you and people, everybody in this feed. We can all begin to behave communally and share our resources communally, even though we live under capitalism. Outro music, Dead Prez. I can't use that. They when you use the actual lyrical music, it kind of cuts off. But I love that song, Malcolm Garvey Huey. Malcolm Garvey Huey. Oh, you're welcome, Daddy Buck. Yeah, I see people getting mad at vegans, and I don't understand why black people think that animal rights and black liberation is mutually exclusive. I see black people who fight for our liberation. Every time they hear about animal rights, they get offended, as if you're taking away from black people's rights. But I think liberate, free the land, repairing and healing ecosystems is the same struggle as liberating African people. They're vegan cheese, Tim. They got vegan cheese. You can eat cheese. You just can't eat cheese that come out of the udder of a cow. You just can't eat cheese that came out of the udder of a goat. You can eat almond cheese. You can eat soy cheese. You could eat cashew cheese. There are cheeses. You could throw down on cheese. If you're in Chicago, we can have a pizza party and all and smothered in cheese. But ain't nothing come out of the udder of a cow. Ain't nothing got no pus. You know. You may eat cheese if you're a vegan. You just can't eat dairy. You can have ice cream, just you can't be sucking on no cow teat. Don't be sucking on no goat teat. But throw down on cheese as much as you want. Just go eat a whole block. I'll go get you some cheese. I got cheese in the house right now. In fact, my wife promised my sons they could have some pizza this weekend. I'll take a picture. Don't look no different than a Pizza Hut pizza, except it ain't no cow pus on there. Eat your cheese, man. Don't let nobody lie to you like that. Cashew cheese is the bomb diggity. It sure is. Vegan bacon, there is vegan bacon. You got tempeh bacon. You know, they got grain, bacon made of grain. It's just a strip food, yeah. Vegan bacon. Smart choice. You got bacon, yes. You just don't cut it off the back of a pig or pull it out of the genitals of a turkey. Uh, Mawari, there are some substitutes. You can get kids like vegan versions of stuff. You can go to Trader Joe's and get them vegan chicken nuggets. Now, this is processed food. It's not the healthiest, but you can trick. I mean, what? He's 8, or is it a girl or a boy? 8-year-olds aren't smart. Trick them. Trick them for their own good. Lie to them for their own. I hope my son's not listening. But you can lie to them for their own good. You can get them chicken nuggets. You can get them the kind of foods, whatever little food they're like. You can get a vegan version of it. They won't know the difference. I know Trader Joe's has a lot of that stuff. And what kid? Feed them French fries and stuff. And then and the veggies. You gotta manipulate them. Just like when parents tell you about the tooth fairy, they tell you about Santa Claus, and you tell them, hey, this little chunk of tofu, it's a chicken nugget. Eat it and shut up. Leave me alone. Just give it a try. Just keep, trick them. Yeah, I said it. All you pure parents out there, I'm not one of you pure parents. I do what I get by. I've always tried to be a mediocre parent. I'm not the kind of parent a child will write. Oh, it's a boy. Oh, then he's not even as clever as a young girl. You could do it. Just trick him. He don't know what's going on. The problem is you told him, my son, we will be vegan. And he was like, what? You don't tell him nothing. Just put it in front of him. He won't know. They got cookies. My son just came and asked me for a cookie. My son just had a little cookie. He don't know. He don't know what it is. Kids don't know nothing. Just don't make an announcement about it. Don't make a production of it, sis. Just do it. Like Nike, like Kaepernick. Just do it. Is that it for questions? I gotta run out of here anyway. Yeah, I gotta make it. It's time for the theme music, y'all. Cause I'm gonna have to get out of here. This is episode 2. We're gonna do this every Monday at night at 7ish. Q&A. Shout out to Chris and one other person stumped me on a question. But I take notes. If I can't answer a question, I take notes. And next time I'll come back and look smarter than I really am by having. So I got some stuff to look up that I'll start with answering those questions. But I took notes. There was another question. I have to go through the comments. But it's live on YouTube. It's live on Facebook, Diallo Kenyatta. And then, of course, Wednesday morning I'll be live with the Bro.Diallo show. I think I'm going to talk about criminal genesis. Or the criminogenic society, as Amos Wilson called, on Wednesday. And so tune in to Bro.Diallo show. You can go to diallokenyatta.com for archive shows, and you can also find ways to support our media apparatus and the media efforts. Also, join NFL, the Nubians for Literacy. We have a national book club, and we produce a syllabus and we discuss a book. That's every Sunday we meet. So we go to on Facebook, holler at Chris, holler at China on Nubians for Literacy. Shout out to Chris and China and all the Nubians for Literacy, which breaks down to NFL, because we're gonna reclaim that. Shout out to Chuck. Maybe can you give me a logo for Q&A with Bro.Diallo? I hate asking Chuck for anything because he seems like such a busy man. But I'm about to be out. I gotta do this theme music. Good night, and I'll see y'all Wednesday morning at Q4 Radio. None of the questions got answered? Really? No questions got answered? Let me go back. People be saying stuff, man. I think some questions got answered. Let's see here. I'm trying to see. Oh, there you go. Cut! Okay. Carl said none of his questions. I'm going to try to... What is your opinion of Christian evangelicals? I feel they are a threat similar to... Yes, Christian evangelicals are a worse threat. They kill more people than Islamic fundamentalists. there's a good book on the entire movement written by a former guy who went to a seminary by Chris Hedges called American Fascists, which is a historical breakdown of Christian fundamentalism. There's also another journalist by the name of Max Blumenthal. But yes, I don't support Christian evangelicals, and you'll find a lot of black militants have an identical ideology and agenda as Christian fundamentalists. If you look at what Umar advocates for the black community, and you look at the Christian evangelical, if you take out Christian and replace it with Africa, if you take out Jesus and replace it with Garvey, everything else is the same. So not only is Christian evangelical are the fascists and a threat, and it's also this concept of dominionism. This concept of dominionism, and also the Christian evangelical, there's so much on this. They believe that they have to provoke a war in the Middle East. That's why Trump is being controlled by the evangelical to move the capital of Israel to Jerusalem, even though Obama was a big time Zionist, but he wasn't that damn stupid. Is because they don't think that the Antichrist can come back until the hordes descend on Israel. So Christian Zionists and evangelicals and dominionists are a great threat. They are rapidly trying to run to nuclear holocaust. They also don't care about global warming and environmental pollution because they believe that the planet Earth is a way station to heaven. And this whole concept that man has dominion over life allows them to destroy the planet because they're going to go to the great hereafter. And they have allies amongst the Mormons and amongst the Jewish, right-wing Jewish Zionists. So you are absolutely right. I have no love, no support, or no sympathy for evangelicals. That is a force of white domination. But what's an even bigger concern I have about the evangelicals is that their fundamental ideology, their concepts of manhood, masculinity, manhead of the household has been adopted. If you look at leaders like Farrakhan and Dr. Umar, these black conservatives, these black so-called nationalists that's supposed to hate the white man, their fundamental ideology is puritanical. And all of that came out of the Calvinist movement. Racism came out of from the Protestant Reformation to the Calvinist sect gave birth to this. So I wish I had gotten to that earlier. That was a good question, Carl. But I hope I spoke to your question. I think they're for shit. So now, can I go back to my theme music? I felt bad. Brother Carl said I didn't answer any of these questions. We going out. I'll see y'all. Get my water. And let's do a book of the week thing. Every week, I'm going to just recommend a book that I like or that I've read. I got some. This week's book is African World Revolution, Africans at the Crossroad by the late, great Dr. John Henry Clark. But I always think it ain't going to be always black books. People, again, get mad at me because I might be some books by white boys or books by people we don't particularly like. So this is the book of the week. Africans for, it should be $40 million slaves. But anyway. So next week, tune in for another book recommendation. Good night, y'all. Be safe. I'll see y'all Wednesday morning.